Good morning. Good morning. My name is Amanda Fonteleone. I am the CYBHI clinician here at Mendocino County Office of Education. And I'm going to go over Mendocino County's approach to communications around CYBHI from our COE level perspective and identifying kind of how we targeted some information sharing and how we intend to do that kind of going forward. So we should have some time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to jump right in for today. So again, my name is Amanda. Here's a brief agenda of what we'll be going over. I'm going to do a little shout out because again, resources and resourcing and networking is your best friend. And there's no point in recreating the wheel when there's a beautiful, amazing, well-oiled engines out there that are working. So really encourage looking at that again, and thank you to those partners that I'll get to. And then I'll break down a little bit, just briefly, what again our population in Mendocino looks like and why we need to have some considerations regarding some of our populations. How we strategically kind of laid out CYBHI, and then just some approaches and considerations. So first, huge shout out, Napa is one of them. They are our regional lead here in the northern part, or kind of northern part. And so I know that this has been shared out already, but this has been exceptionally helpful. It's things that we include in our newsletters. Jill did a beautiful job at creating this, and I know she presented on that already. And then also Ventura has been so gracious when they shared out their toolkit guide, and MCOE really kind of took a lot of those key components and created our own kind of mini version of that, and we'll be continuing to work off of that. And then of course DHCS and capacity grants and having all of those resources. So those were a big part of this as we started to build out our communication and engagement plan. So a little bit about Mendocino County, again, really briefly, we have support about 22 LEAs. We have about over 13,000 students or so in our population, 11 of those being tribal nations, and a significant amount of our population being Hispanic population. We are very diverse geographically, so we have spots in our counties where you don't have cell service or they don't have access. Our buses and public transportation don't access those parts of the county for various reasons. And so there's a lot of unique kind of hurdles that we have to navigate in order to kind of troubleshoot how do we get information to the students and families that we serve? How do we make sure that they have access to that information in a way that is digestible to them, right? Not kind of our language at our level, but really in kind of layman's terms of what does that look like? So some key considerations that we did is one, obviously, I think this is across the board in California, but making sure we have resources available in multiple languages. As a rural community with limited resources and capacity, that can be a challenge sometimes because we have multiple languages outside of English and Spanish that are in our community. And so we have to make sure that we are providing resources in as many of those languages as we can. And then we also have to make sure that we have, again, understanding from our population's perspective is what is CYBHI, right? Putting it into more common language that all campuses and locations can utilize, and really identifying the potential impact for those particular populations. And so again, I'll touch on a little bit of that as we go. And then a bigger piece of this that we really wanted to hit in terms of our outreach is really reducing the stigma and the mistrust that we have in our community for any professional entity. There's a lot of mistrust, especially in our tribal nations. There's historical context that we have to consider, and we have to think about how do we support those particular populations in a way that is culturally relevant and culturally sensitive and culturally informed. And again, making sure, I think a big part of that is leaning into our relationships that we already have really worked to build in our different communities. And again, I'll touch on that and what that looks like. So some key talking points that we kind of started with that we wanted to make sure were consistent in some way, shape, or form across our platforms was making sure that, again, the language might change depending on who we're talking about sometimes, but really making sure that it's regular, consistent, repeated communication. We'll break down a little bit in terms of what that looks like, but that is making sure that we are constantly talking about CYBHI, even if we're not labeling it CYBHI, we're really making sure that we're talking about mental health, behavioral health, substance use support services on school campuses and what that looks like. really making sure that wherever and whoever we're talking to or presenting to, that we can give that bird's eye level overview of what CYBHI is. And then also, again, making sure that we identify who are going to be those providers and those touch points. So if we're working with schools or school providers and educators, it's helping them identify these are the people who will, again, are already providing those services. And this is what they look like on your campuses. And so really tailoring that language to make sure that, again, that we're speaking to the populations that we're speaking with. And then highlighting another piece is that it's fitting into something that is already established. So in Mendocino County, I'm sure like many places across the state, we really made sure and put a big push on MTSS, PBAS frameworks and systems to make sure that that core foundation is there. And so a big piece that we really like to emphasize is that it is something, again, that we're already doing, that really the big lift is behind the scenes from our COE level. And that really kind of breaking it down from each population as to what is needed from them. So again, if it's a COE level, right, you'll see that we have, if we're talking to superintendents, we're specifically asking them particular things or giving them specific information that's relevant to them. If we're talking to students and families, that information is going to look very different. But we want to make sure that they understand these are services that have been provided to our students and families already and will be continued to be provided. This is just, again, a significant now funding stream, right, to support those services staying on campus. And then again, why it matters to schools. So it really emphasizing that there's no impact on their copays, deductibles, all of those pieces. So what you see on the right is just kind of in some of our presentations, I will go a deep dive into this a little bit more depending on who I'm talking with, but these are just some of the touch points of what the investment in CYBHI is, what is the actual kind of outcome and revenue that we can have coming back into our communities, and then what are our deliverables? What does that look like from start to finish? So in some way, shape, or form, this is kind of shared out, but really highlighting, again, depending on who we're talking to, what we might focus on a little bit more. So we also show with our providers, we also kind of highlight the illustrated example, and we kind of built off of what DHCS had in their office hours in terms of, and in the program manuals, like what does it look like and what is the actual impact of CYBHI? So I'm a visual learner, and so I am very big on trying to make sure that we have something that really shows you the impact of what that is. So we always give an example of, again, these are our providers who are already on campus. This is a licensed provider who's providing various services. Again, this is what if they're doing a combination of LEA BOP or special education or a different funding source, we kind of highlight for that given school or a district or LEA, depending on what program we're talking about, and really emphasizing this is where they're at currently and billing for that. And then this is what the potential of doing CYBHI is. So always making that link and connection of, again, it's not a funding source that is sustainable of an entire position or program in and of itself, but that it can supplement those areas of different supports for our students and families, again, that we're already doing, we're going to continue to do, but now we have those funding sources that are coming in. So here's a breakdown, I'm going to go into this, of our tiered and targeted audiences. And so at Mendocino, we really had to break it down based off of the populations that we serve. And the way that we did that is we did it based off of district levels. And then we broke it down to more provider, individual kind of site level. And then we focused on our community and our students and families. So that's the tier approach that we took. And I'm going to break this down a little bit in these next few slides. So in tier 1 at our district leads, what we started off with, and we're cohort 2, how we started off was that we had really entry-level basic communication in the form of an email, in the form of an official letter that went out. And again, these have links in them so you can pull up what it was that was sent out. But really communicating with LEA leads, whether that's superintendents or principals or people that we have those direct relationships already, saying, hey, this is an initiative the state is doing. This is coming down the pipe. We are going to, we would like to enter into a consortium model with this because we already have that model established for our LEA BOP and some other programs. So it fits seamlessly into what our approach was, again, already really emphasizing minimal impact in the sense of structure and what that looks like. And then making sure that we really attended strategically those higher level meetings. So for us, those higher level meetings were the superintendent's meetings. We have a principals network, which is a community of practice for our principals across our county. We targeted our SELPA and special education steering committee meetings, again, where you have more leads for those programs who are providing oversight, and again, have that bird's eye level oversight of the services their providers are already doing. We also then accessed our family liaisons because we wanted to make sure that we hit kind of every tier on some level, and that blends into our next tier also. And also the business managers, because those are also the people who are going to be able to talk with superintendents about the financial impact and the fiscal impact and what does that look like, sometimes on a more specific level than we can, but really making sure that we can answer those questions, again, with some really structured tier conversation. So some key pitches and focal points that we highlighted was the changing landscape, right? That education encompasses the whole child perspective, not just academics. And that behavioral mental health doesn't have to be something we are constantly exporting out. It can be something, again, we're already doing, again, and capturing what that looks like and kind of the need to really blend such programs. We also highlighted supplemental funding with this so that, again, that we know schools provide behavioral health supports, but also made sure to not overpromise what it is that we're selling with the initiative, right? I think some DHCS or others, right, were kind of like, this is going to be this huge program. It's going to be a big money maker. This is going to like fund all of these pieces that we need to fund. And fact of the matter is that's not true, or at least not true yet, maybe, right? Like we may not be far along to be fair. But really making sure we're not over promising or overselling what the program is, and really making sure so that way when we go into it, they have a really clear, realistic, transparent understanding at their level of what that is. And that, again, was really intentional because we didn't want them coming back and saying, oh, this is so much more than it was. And like, there's all this stress or there's all of this other stuff that's around it. We really made sure to be transparent every step of the way, and including being really focused on, again, that this is a supplemental funding stream, not a sustainable funding stream. So that's the biggest piece at this level that I would just highlight that I think was received very well from our superintendents, because I think initially they had heard some stuff and, maybe they attended a webinar and it was, oh, this is this huge thing and it's going to sustain programs, and right. And we really had to say, maybe in a perfect world or in a program where we have all the pieces we need to do that, and maybe that's our goal, we're going to shoot for, the moon so we can land amongst the stars. Like, that's what we're going to do. But let's be realistic. We got to like build the rocket, and we got to do all the things, and we got to get there. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some strategy. And so being really honest and transparent about that. We also made sure at this level to contrast the different programs that we have. So like you saw, saying, here's a provider who's doing special education or LEA BOP, and then highlighting how CYBHI fits in and blends into those models, again, for the systems we already have in place. So again, nothing new is per se happening, but that really it's, hey, your provider should be documenting already. Your providers are doing these services already. Now let's find, again, that funding stream and make sure that they're documenting and recording in the right spot. And so really making sure they understood that. And then highlighting the fiscal impact that we're leveraging, again, our current providers. We took the approach of not starting with adding new providers or certifying new wellness coaches. We really started with, let's start with who you already have and build on that, and let's start small. And so the action item that we asked of them at this tier was to give us a direct link to their site leads or their IT lead, because of the connecting to our EHR, but giving us direct contact and permission to now go to that next level and say, cool, we talked about it with superintendents, who in your districts are ready to go, and being able to connect that. And so there's a link that we created that they can only district superintendents have, that they then can submit and tell us exactly who they want connected. So then to the next, once we get to that point, we started our tier 2 kind of communications and targeting of that. So that looks like I have a monthly counselors network COP that I provide for our school-based mental health professionals, school counselors, certified wellness coaches, but really anybody who's identified as providing some type of supports or is involved in mental health supports or tiered supports are welcome to come to that. And so we always introduce CYBHI at the very beginning. That's a standing agenda item. It's really brief. But in that is also linked our CYBHI newsletter, which also goes out to all the school-based mental health professionals, but it also includes the superintendents. It also includes the principals. It also includes maybe community providers or community partners who might be involved in that, who we have been linked to and connected with, that strategically kind of lays out information at different steps of the way that they can reference, as well as other mental health supports and things that go in that. So the biggest piece about the newsletter is making sure, again, that we wanted to be transparent about where we were at in the process, to not overpromise anything, but also so that they knew these are the things that we are working on. Here are the infrastructures that we're building. Here's how we're going to work together. And here's some things you can do if you're ready, but really emphasizing we're with them every step of the way. We also, in that process, created a landing page on our website that's CYBHI specific. When you go to that, there's a landing page, and then they can go to either district and site kind of section, which also includes resources for them, or they can go to a student and family one. So if student and families are wanting that, or that we need language to utilize with students and families, that they have examples that they can reference, they can pull from, they can use on their own messaging, but it's all there and it is updated as frequently as I get new information. And then we also then, from that point forward, once we identified our pilot schools and identifying who that was, we then again have the connection to the providers. And so that is another Google form that was created that includes all of the relevant information that we needed in order to get them set up and onboarded. And so as a part of that process, they not only get onboarded to the EHR, but again, that same consistent communication is being reviewed with them. And then there's a next strategic step of having some outreach and communication plans to talk about what are things to consider when talking with families? What are things to consider when talking with your school staff? Where do you talk about this? How do you talk about this? What material do you hand out? So there's a lot of referencing with that. So again, some key pitches and focal points is, again, alignment, that this program aligns with what we're already doing in the school systems, and that really there's minimal impact to workflow once we get that initial onboarding up and going. We also made sure that with the integration, that the language that we use as we talk about it, and this includes in our EHR, is consistent with what they're doing on our campuses. We didn't want this to be something where they were learning something brand new or having to learn all the codes or things like that. And so we really made sure that, again, all the language we talked about in terms of these are the services on campuses you're providing had that direct link when they were being trained and onboarded as to how they were documenting those pieces too. A strategy at this level is we are taking the approach of starting small and building on that. So we are not starting off saying, hey, we're going to go campus wide. Hey, we think that we should do this entire population of service students. We're really saying, start with your high touch points. Start with those students who come in frequently. Start with the ones you have relationships with and build off of that and learn from that to see what's going to work for them on campuses. We also really highlight the efficiency piece of this. So again, navigating the EHR, we have support and trainings on the consents and best practices for note writing, insurance, et cetera, all of which again has very similar consistent language that we use. And then the biggest piece with this one that we found was most beneficial was really avoid using the word billing when you're talking with providers, because it feels like it makes it more about money. It's like, it's like, oh, it's a moneymaker. What can I bill for? Instead, we started really intentionally using the word claiming or reimbursement. And that seemed there was a definitely noticeable shift amongst the providers and anybody that we spoke to really emphasize, like, yes, like we are billing, but like we are taking care of that more on the back end is how we kind of frame it. And again, we are claiming and get reimbursed for the services we're already providing. And then our last kind of targeted audience are our community and our student and family level. And again, this went out with a CYBHI mental health social media campaign, which I'll share a little bit here in a second. We also made sure to attend local community child serving groups or committees, whether that's our county behavioral health committees, whether that's we have a child trauma team action team committee here in our county. We have multiple committees that are child and youth serving that often have community partners that have the potential to build partnerships potentially or at least have that connection to families and can resource them to these different pieces or share, hey, don't be afraid to give insurance information, or let me help you get that insurance information, right? We might have triple P parenting classes happening that are maybe not related directly to our school-based services. But if they know that this is, hey, this is something that's going to support our community, can support our students and families, they can have those conversations even when the school providers are not there. So really making sure that we targeted any groups that might have high touch points with our students and families to get that message out. And then attending on-campus and student family events. So that looks like tabling, that looks like classroom presentations, that might be a virtual presentation. But that has been really great because you can have those one-on-one conversations. And so at our level, we started at our COE, we started with one of our schools in our college and career programs. And that was intentional because not only did we wanted to target them as students, but we also know that many of them have students who are in the school system. And so we really made sure to, again, look at the top down, but really hit it at every single level. So again, some key pitches and focal points, identify the reality and struggles of accessing that. So again, being real, like normalizing. It is hard, especially in our county, to access services in a timely manner or to access services at all. So really emphasizing this is going to be a significant support to help access that, to reduce the caseloads and the wait that you wait, to reduce those pieces. And so really highlighting that. Again, helping them understand that COE is just a piece of the puzzle. It is meeting them where they're at, again, meeting them when they need it, avoiding those long wait lists, getting some some immediate supports that they can have access to. And again, that there's no impact on them, that they get to provide their insurance information with no impact, but really connecting for them that not only is your information confidential and it's an impact for your student, but you are having a ripple effect to the rest of your school community and the students around you. And then really connecting those pieces of like, what would that be like if your student went to a school where there was a reduction in mental health issues or reduction in behavioral health issues, again, and how it fits into that. So really helping them understand how does it impact you as a student or a family, and that, and having those really high direct conversations with that was really helpful. And again, there's no catch. Like there's no secret billing. There's nothing that's happening with that, right? Avoiding the billing conversation, but really kind of helping them understand that it keeps funding in the schools, and that it does help to build a safety net for our students. Again, that all they have to do is share that insurance information, and that will unlock hopefully hopefully slew of unrestricted funding that can support our students and families. So some roadblocks and challenges. Oh, sorry, my pictures didn't show up. One is the lack of awareness of CYBHI and mental health stigma and a lack of access and resources in our particular community. I know that's across the state, but especially in our rural community. Again, like we have students who can't access this. We have students who maybe, they are resourceful and they know how to get connected to the internet or on a phone, right? But they may not know how to get the supports they need when they need it. And so we decided to have a social media campaign. And so what that looked like, our main goal of the first phase was to have resource sharing, awareness of CYBHI, but also the free resources from DHCS, the Take Pause, right, Bright Light Kids, Saluna, all of those pieces were intentionally kind of scheduled out. And then also too, we created for SEL week, we created an SEL toolkit, which also included those resources and some language around that too. And then what you see over here is our asset tracker. This is what we use internally with our director of communications to really outline what are the resources that we're going to share. Again, what's the purpose of them? What is the blurb that we're going to state? And who is our target audience? When are we going to post that? How are we going to post that? Are we going to post it on different platforms? Are we going to post it as a video? So this is a pretty large spreadsheet, but essentially that's how we did that. And we planned it out and sat down and really said, our first goal is just awareness and people hearing to start to say, oh, I've heard CY, some acronym before, like what is this, right? And so that was our first phase, and we just concluded that in April. And again, it was intentionally, again, shared in a way that our districts could also take from that and share with their schools and students as well. And then another, again, phase two is, again, same lack of awareness. Although, we have had a big push for that, we are still experiencing that. We still experience significant stigma around accessing services. And now we're starting to target that need for insurance and consent. especially as we go into the new school year. And so we are going to starting in at the end of the school year, about July or so, and then through the first half of the school year, again, target again parent family flyers, not only from DHCS, but we are working on individual district wide so that they're familiar again to their families. Back to school integration. So this is looking like conversations of making sure it's again enrollment packets, it's in Parent Square, Aries, that there's also paper consents with that. Making sure we have some operational alignment with some of that information. So again, the insurance collection, again, highlighting, hey, one of our districts, they decided to pair it with their sports and field trips and health services, and they kind of combined the ask for the insurance, not the consent, but the ask for the insurance information to say, we're going to need this anyways for your student for the rest of the school year. Let's gather this now, though we don't have to gather it from you down the road, and it won't prevent your student from not going on a field trip or playing sports. And they were reporting about 60% or so that they actually got back from their whole population. That's not all who will be billed the CYBHI, but that's a pretty good number for our district on the coast. And then again, making sure that we have multi-channel student and family touch points, again, that we kind of referenced before. Oh, okay, cool. I'm done with that. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm timing wise. So any questions that people might have, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Amanda, for your amazing presentation. We only have time for one question, so I'm going to read Jill's question out loud. What community feedback was received from the social media campaign? Was there any concern raised from outside the school community or unanticipated feedback?
I have not heard of any negative feedback from it. I guess the only negative feedback, and I won't even call it negative, just more feedback, is that I think we were hoping it would have higher touch points and sharing. And so I think what we're learning too is, we did it on Instagram, we did it on Facebook, we did it kind of everywhere we could. But then there's those other touch points of like Reddit and TikTok and these other places that students are actually accessing. And then also, again, finding those more strategic places where parents can access it. Again, many of our certain populations are not always accessing those platforms. And so that was kind of the piece of if they have a Facebook or they have an Instagram, it's been really well received, but it's not everybody's accessing it there. So just making sure that we have multi-channel support. So that's our next piece. Actually, I have a meeting next week with our director to talk about the next phase. And our hope is to target that even further. And again, when we put out communication, it is always in English and Spanish. I don't think that there might have been one video we put out that there wasn't a Spanish version from DHCS, but the rest always have multiple languages. And so far, it's been well received by the people that it's been accessing. But this next round, our different avenues will be tracking those numbers, which is we did not do that this time around.
Thank you. Let's see. I hope you're seeing all of the amazing affirmations in the chat for you. Folks just really love your work. If y'all have follow-up questions, feel free to connect with Amanda. We'll make sure to share her contact, but you can also find her on our online community. So with that, we want to give another shout out to Amanda. Thank you for joining us. Very impressed with your work, and maybe we'll do a follow-up as you continue to move through